few questions for Erika, and if we have time, we'll take a few more questions. Erika, you said there's no such thing as ESG. What's going on there?
Okay, so let's go to the first thing first. The reason I say there's no such thing as ESG investing is because it's not a style, right? It shouldn't be like a fund that's labeled that. It's not a panacea, certainly, right? It doesn't mean anything except in the context of analysis, all right? Any piece of ESG data, any piece, is simply a starting point for further inquiry. That's it, all right? If one genuinely thinks you can do ESG investing by virtue of looking at lots and lots of data, and the quality may or may not be good, but if you look at lots and lots of data, look at the ratings and the rankings that are out there, all right? Try to connect them to each other, kind of like a system. None of that, in my view, is investing. It's not, it's taking a tool like a hammer and like thinking, oh, everything looks like a nail, so you just hammer around, right? This is not investing, all right? It is a tool. And the problem we have, and I mentioned it before, is that when this tool became, too widely used by, frankly, practitioners that really didn't have the wisdom and the understanding to use it, and then you started seeing funds not even recreated, but renamed to go into the market, as an ESG fund or sustainability fund. In fact, there was one quarter when I think it was 90% of new funds that were listed as ESG were just renamed old funds, right? And so you started to get a little crazy with that. You saw the data, the ESG data, used in many different ways, in many different ratings and ranking systems. There was a lot of inconsistency, right? And then you saw scrutiny on it. So regulators start to go and see, oh, should we have disclosure of ESG factors? And when you start to put ideological stuff into what should be pragmatic stuff, then you start to have a problem again with the regulators in particular, right? And again, most importantly, with the outcomes. So there were a lot of problems there. So some of the issues now we brought upon ourselves, right?
You said it's still a useful tool.
Absolutely.
But not a strategy. And I think that's a nice way of differentiating.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, any piece of information, you go down an avenue of inquiry, you may or may not find something. There was one story where there was one point where I remember Hess, the oil company, got like a terrible rating because it looked like their oil spills were much worse than anyone of their size. Well, it turns out that the reason their oil spills looked a little worse is because they were counting when a customer is filling their tank and didn't entirely shut off, the thing when they pulled it out of the tank. Those oil spills were included in the rating. The rating didn't make any sense at all. So you go down again a little further, and you see different things that maybe shouldn't be there. Why would Exxon have some very good rankings in certain, analyses? Like, what's that about? You have to find out. Don't look at the rating and the ranking, look at the data, and then go do your own research. By the way, once an investor, and I'm talking about BlackRock or anyone else, once an investor understands the discipline of ESG analysis, portfolio manager, an analyst, you can't unremember that, right? You know it, you know how to do it, you know when it gives you an interesting risk-reward insight, so it doesn't go away. We might not call it that. We don't have to call it that. There is nothing that doesn't somehow fit as an ESG data point. Everything's an ESG, which is, maybe what's a problem.
And as you said, we don't call it ESG anymore. BlackRock doesn't call it ESG. They call it transition investing, don't they?
Everyone can call it whatever they want, as long as it's investing.
Yeah, self-form investing. All right, thank you. Thank you for that clarification on ESG. So Let's talk about another even more controversial issue in the investing world, which is DEI, which has been under relentless attack recently. What are your thoughts from an investor perspective on DEI, and where do we go?
It's a little bit the same as ESG. DEI, by the way, let me talk about some Columbia research. I don't know if Professor Catherine Phillips is still here. Not here? Okay. What?
Passed away.
Oh my God. Well, one of the great professors here, may her memory be her blessing also, Catherine Phillips did some really interesting work on DEI. It was beyond the idea, which there's loads of research that shows that diversity makes for better decision making, right? She went beyond that. She did a really interesting piece of research that showed that, clearly diverse groups make better decisions. But she also said that it's interesting because from the outside, it appears that diverse groups look less highly functioning. It looks like from the outside, this is messy, and it's not working so well, and it's hard. And then she did the research on top of that that showed that from the inside themselves, diverse groups feel like we're less highly functional. We're messy, we're not doing so well. Again, absolutely, inconsistent with the reality. And so I think I wrote a piece at the time when she came out with that piece, and I said diversity, painful but profitable, all right? So we know that all the research supports that. And look around, okay? We don't have to talk, how many years ago? So 25 years ago, I'm the first out lesbian on a Wall Street trading floor, right? I didn't really need to talk about diversity. I was kind of living it, right? Just being a woman. So I think diversity is an evolutionary imperative. It's going to happen, right? Unfortunately, we can accelerate it or we can slow it down. And so the latter bums me out. But evolution is going to make it happen. Look at a wolf, all right? So wolves kind of helped the world get dogs, domesticated dogs, right? There was evolution there based on, certain characteristics, human intervention, certain characteristics that made the dogs have a little better survival, right? So that's evolution. That only took about 50,000 years, I think, right? And so woolly mammoths broke off into Asian and African elephants, and both of those were more suited to their environment than the woolly mammoths, who haven't actually been gone for all of that long. And then, of course, there's the dinosaurs, who turned into the birds, right? And so again, the birds are more suited now to this environment. And then there's, asteroids and stuff like that. But my point is, evolution is good, and
Hopefully we don't have to wait 50,000 years. Though.
Well, that's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping.
Okay.
So hopefully it won't slow down that much. But it's good. It's going to happen. And diversity is going to happen because it's better. And you guys can probably tell about me. I like to have fun. It's so much more fun.
So let me ask you a question then. And then I want to get some questions from the audience. We don't have too much time. Speaking of having fun, you've founded a company. How much fun is it being an entrepreneur? What are the challenges? What are your thoughts on being an entrepreneur?
Oh boy. Okay, so I'll use an analogy I've used before. Being an entrepreneur is like jumping out of a plane and building the parachute on the way down. All right? It is fucking so scary, right? But at the same time, there are moments of just, wild excitement and optimism, and there are moments that you're desperately scared, freaked out, right? But there's both. But I think what I had to do is really just remind myself, I have got this right. I am as certain as I can be that I've got this right. And the final analysis, if any of you are starting companies, founding companies, raising capital, whatever, people invest in people. People invest in leaders. And so, again, move people. You can't move money unless you move people, right?
Great way of putting it. Speaking of people, questions from the crowd? And I think there's a mic, in front here, yeah. Right here. Sorry, you didn't see him. Sorry, can you put your hand again? Yeah, there. Yeah, there.
Hi, so thank you so much for your time. Quick question on manufacturing and climate. Let's say I have a manufacturing business back in India. I can make $10 million in profit by harming the environment. And on the other hand, I can make maybe $1 million without harming the environment. What would you recommend and why?
Say that again, without.
Let's say I can make $1 million with pure profit without harming the environment,
Without harming the
and
environment.
$10 million after harming the environment.
Right.
As a climate conscious investor, or I don't know, what would you call yourself, but what would you recommend and why?
Okay. Well, I call myself an investor, period, right? And yes, I am looking for businesses that are transforming things for systemic problems, right? So I'm an investor. I love chimps, as you can see. But, there's no answer to that question. It's about your priorities and your values. And it's about trade-offs. We talked about that before, right, with ChatGPT versus just Google. So it's about trade-offs. And so I will tell you that my daughters, I have 3 little girls, not little girls, oh my God. I have 3 big girls, grown-up children. And every time they know, like when I made the chimp picture, they are so pissed at me for using, AI. And I said to them, I usually just Google something. But they're so pissed at me because of, the energy consumption. And so for me, I made the decision, okay, I won't do that very often, that kind of use. But in this case, I wanted to show you guys, and I wanted to honor Jane Goodall. So, but that actually isn't honoring her, I guess, because I was using too much energy, and she was, a sustainable investor too. Ow. My point is, it is absolutely your decision. It's absolutely a trade-off. The good part is when I talk about the next economy, we're going to get to a place where, who mentioned it? Preeti mentioned it. By the way, that panel was so awesome. Those people have forgotten more about, climate finance than I'll ever know, right? So Preeti mentioned about unit economics, right? She's absolutely right. That's what we have to think about. So ultimately, with the energy transition, we're going to make the fuel costs come down so much that you won't have to make that trade-off, right? Takes some time. But again, there's that flywheel. It's happening, So your call. Your call. Oh, by the way, there's a story by Leo Tolstoy. And I think it's called How Much Land Does a Man Need? Read it. Because what it talks about is, how much do you need? And if you need enough, then the financial capital becomes less compelling. The relational, social capital and natural capital becomes more compelling. So read that. That's a wonderful piece from Tolstoy. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, thanks for being here today.
Sure.
In considering your investments, what levers do you think are conducive to a positive green alpha?
It really is. Those 3 things I said, big picture. Is a company in a unique position to address a systemic risk? And can that company, is it defensible in terms of their strategy? And can that company scale? Right? Those are the high-level things. And then, again, it's investing. Maybe we look at that first. But then you go down and you look at the operational issues. You know, the stuff that you look at when you're investing, right? The margins, everything you need to look at. And cash flows, is it financially sustainable, right? But again, there's no holy grail. I think the competitive environment is crazy important. I would argue that many entrepreneurs, myself included, don't analyze the competitive environment as much as they should, because to some degree, they don't want to know, because it might scare the shit out of them, right? But those are the kind of things you think about. Yeah.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I just had a question in regard to like beginner steps of investing, maybe specifically for nonprofit organizations, not necessarily for entrepreneurs or for-profit organizations. So if a nonprofit wanted to start to go down that road of investing in raising capital, is there like any beginner steps you would recommend, or any literature even maybe that can like guide a nonprofit or individual who's not necessarily familiar with investing, like that how to like, I know like nothing is like risk-free, but the knowledge to maybe like not make so many mistakes in the beginning when you're first starting out investing.
I mean, I think it was mentioned on one of the panels again. Hugely important time frame for any kind of investor, right? Risk appetite, any kind of investor. Now you put a bunch in together, so nonprofits, NGOs, foundations, endowments, family foundations, families, and new investors, right? The bottom line is just remember that everyone thinks finance is like so complicated. It's discounted cash flows, that's it. You know, that's kind of it. It's compound interest, you're done. Is that fair?
Totally fair. I think people put finance in this pedestal. It's
so
BS.
not, right?
It's very
Compound
simple.
interest, you're done.
Yeah.
So I did really well when I was here. Actually, I did okay. Okay, so here's what I would suggest. My single favorite author / expert in the world of foundations, okay, is a woman named Clara Miller. Clara comes from the Heron Foundation. She was one of the people, she was on the founding board of the SASB, where I was, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. She was in that group of pragmatists when I talk about faithful, thoughtful pragmatists. So Clara's written a lot. You start by looking at Clara's work. And again, that's kind of the foundation world. And then for foundations, you start thinking about how do you align your money, your investments, all right, the 95% of your capital, how do you align that with your values and your mission? It is eminently doable, all right? So that's kind of the nonprofit world, or the foundation world, I would say. With regard to foundation and nonprofit, not-for-profit, I've never worked in the nonprofit world except for a year stint at the Aspen Institute, which was pretty cool. But it seems to me like the idea of a model of kind of earned income, figure out if you have a nonprofit, how it can also make some money. You know what, look at the model for Grayston Bakeries. Okay, they're up in Yonkers, I think. So Grayston sells the brownies that go into Ben & Jerry's ice cream. And Ben & Jerry's is obviously owned by Unilever. But Grayston is an interesting model in terms of really a social impact company, right? Financing itself to some degree. And then for individual investors, you start small, you kind of leg in. We have an ETF. It's intended to make everything very easy for people. It's called, shockingly, the Next Economy ETF. So simplicity is actually really good. And when you guys think about strategy, when you think about if you do want to be an entrepreneur, figure out how to take simplicity, right, and combine it with complexity, because the simplicity lets you clearly articulate and simply what your mission is and what you're doing so everyone can understand it. For me, next economy, future generation, right? So that's the simplicity part. Complexity, because if it were easy, anybody could do it, right? Complexity means you have, hopefully, a sustainable competitive advantage, right? So that's what you want to find together when you start a firm, I think.
We have time for one more question down here in the front.
Coming to speak, I wanted to ask, when you think about the next economy, what are the types of milestones that you look for, especially with innovation, like when it comes to things like drug discovery, quantum computing, things like that? You talked a little bit about data centers and this company that you mentioned about the marine hulls. What are some of the milestones that you're most excited about or that you're looking forward to?
I mean, again, it goes back to what Preeti said. The unit economics, as the unit economics improve, things are going to accelerate. Marginal cost of energy will hopefully go to like nothing. Over the past, I think it's over the past like half decade, the cost of solar has come down by like 90%. That's awfully close to 100%. It's like, that's cool, right? So I think, you know, those kind of economic finance issues, I think, are really good to look at. Here's another data point. With regard to AI-driven drug discovery, there's a data point now, I think it's like an NIH, it's, you know, that AI-assisted drug discovery works 15 times as fast as what we've been doing before, and is getting twice the level of early clinical success as it was before. So you start to see numbers like that, and again, that's amazing. So I think you start to look at, you know, you start to look at what's happening there on a micro level. By the way, just a show of hands, does anyone understand in English, simplicity, what quantum computing is? Oh my God, none of you? That's so cool, because I feel so much better, because I totally don't understand it. But I'll tell you what, there was a senior engineer at Intel who said to me, he said, okay, picture AI, what AI is doing. Picture a little mouse, you know, in a maze. So with AI, that little mouse is running so fast, and, you know, looking for the different solutions so fast. You know, 1,000,000 times as fast as anybody else could do it. And he's like, that's great, that's AI. Now, with quantum computing, little maze, little mouse, that little mouse is looking at every alternative to get through the maze simultaneously. What? Could you, like, that's quantum mechanics. That's all I know, but now we all know the same amount, right? So in terms of, you know, what's coming, take that and think about how you use that in the transportation industry, right? Logistics. Think about drug discovery, we talk about. Think about asset management. What does that do? My industry is like screwed, right? Think about every application that AI and quantum can touch. We are in the biggest transformation in the history of the world, literally, right? And there's nothing that's going to stop it. And when it comes to those extinctions I talked about, let's just hope that we're not the next species, because that's not out of the question. Frankly, the Earth does not give a shit about human beings, right? The Earth is going to be fine. It's going to be less, you know, more hostile to us. The Earth will be fine, but our generations, Lador Vador, will not. So we have a lot of work to do, and I think it's time that you get moving, all right? And I am so happy to be here. You know, it's a pleasure.
Please join me in thanking Erika Karp.